Hey everyone, and welcome to Tactical Inc., your portal to the captivating realm of all things Lorcana. I'm Alex.
And I'm Bradley. Almost a year ago to the day, Lorcana released their very first set, the first chapter. And today we're going to look back at the impactful cards and combos of each of the first 4 sets that came out within the year.
We've got a lot of different cards and combos to look at, and we'll more than likely miss or forget some of them. So please let us know your favorite cards and your favorite combos that have come out this year by leaving a comment below. So with that, let's begin by looking at Lorcana's very first set, the first chapter.
The first chapters list may be the longest out of all the sets, and you'll see many of these cards still being played today. But one issue the first set had was not a lot of great card draw, outside of cards like Friends on the Other Side, Rapunzel Gifted with Healing, both Stitch Rockstar and Stitch Carefree Surfer, and A Whole New World.
Yeah, all of those are still used to an extent today. A few of these others aren't used as much anymore, such as Be Our Guest in Amber, Amethyst having the Queen Wicked and Vain, as well as the item Magic Mirror. Emerald had the Mad Hatter, and Ruby didn't have anything. Sapphire had Robin Hood Unrivaled Archer and Develop Your Brain, and Steel had Simba Future King, Tinkerbell Tiny Tactician, Beast's Mirror, and Musketeer Tabard, all just mostly doing a lot of draw and discard. And these were pretty much the only options you could use to draw extra cards in the beginning of the meta, so most of these cards were seen in almost every deck.
Now looking at some of the big ink combinations of the first chapter, we'll go to Amber Steel with the famous Steel Song, a deck that is still finding its way in the top deck of meta every now and then. And the first chapter's iteration is really no different than today, using one of the main cards of the deck being Ariel Spectacular Singer. But the deck also utilized low-level aggro characters such as Lilo Making a Wish, Simba Protective Cub to protect your smaller characters as well. It also used the item Lantern to ramp for your characters, and Stitch New Dog to be a shift target for Stitch Rockstar, who also, along with Rapunzel Gifted with Healing, were your main draw options. And some decks would use Hades, Ruler of the Underworld, to get cards back from your discard pile, but I would argue that his importance becomes more recognizable in Rise of the Floodborn when Mufasa is released.
Where we talked about having very few draw options in the beginning, Steel Song actually thrived with one of the best cards in the deck being A Whole New World, a song that could be used very early as soon as turn 4 thanks to Ariel Spectacular Singer's Singer 5 ability. She also could sing another song that's arguably one of the best of the time and even now, which is Grab Your Sword. Other steel cards commonly seen with this deck were Captain Hook Forceful Duelist to have some early game control, along with Simba Future King as well to keep that engine going. Hercules True Hero could be a great bodyguard at the time, and Prince Eric Dashing and Brave was a good option to remove early threats in the game.
But one of the best cards in the deck, and a card you'll still see popping up in steel decks today, is Tinkerbell Giant Fairy, along with Tinkerbell Tiny Tactician to shift her out earlier. She is so good in this deck because she can remove threats and also be a great option to sing with. And looking at other steel options, we had Beast Hard-Headed and Break that were really the only options to deal with items such as Lantern, Shield of Virtue, and Magic Mirror. And many of these steel decks would run damage options such as Smash and Fire the Cannons. Something you would see every now and then in these decks was Han's 13th in line. At the time, he was one of these characters that was unique for dealing damage and gaining lore at the same time.
Now moving on to look at another Amber Steel deck we actually saw quite a bit of was a Musketeer's Bodyguard deck. It used bodyguards that we mentioned before like Hercules True Hero and Simba Protective Cub, but it also included things like Maximus Palace Horse and the 3 Musketeers, Donald Duck Musketeer, Goofy Musketeer, and Mickey Mouse Musketeer. They had a pretty good draw engine going with Musketeer's Tabard, which when one of your bodyguard characters were banished, you'd draw a card. And a great card that went into a lot of Amber decks that paired especially well with this was Just in Time, an action that could get your big bodyguards out earlier, like Goofy or Maximus. This deck did have a major weakness, and that was Sapphire removal cards such as Hades Infernal Schemer and Let It Go, 2 cards that didn't banish your opponent's characters but turned them into ink, bypassing the effect of Musketeer's Tabard.
And speaking of Sapphire, we saw a few color combinations using this color, and probably the 2 biggest being Sapphire Ruby and Sapphire Steel. The Sapphire part of the decks were very similar in strategy, using ramp to play your big spells like Maleficent Dragon and Tinkerbell Giant Fairy. Grandma Tala, Mickey Mouse Detective, Fishbone Quill, and One Jump Ahead were all key to pushing your ink higher and higher. And one of the biggest goals was Belle's Strange but Special. Get into 10 ink as fast as you can to get a huge amount of lore. She also had great protection from other cards in Sapphire, like Aurora Dream Guardian, giving all characters ward, Hades Infernal Schemer and Let It Go, removing threats from the board, and even Phil, Trainer of Heroes, to remove early threats from the game. But there was another way to play the deck, but it really wasn't at its full power yet, and that was using items in Sapphire. With Ariel Who's It Collector, many dreamed of an infinite lore scenario, and people would get close with a whole new world. However, the sleeping giant was Tamatoa, something that really didn't hit its stride until we got better items next set.
And this gets us into Ruby, a color that was seen with almost every color, and it's because of all its removal options. Gaston Arrogant Hunter and Maui Hero to All were challenging characters to remove them, and Maui at the time was removing 1 to 3 characters by himself, which was great. We also had Maleficent Dragon and Dragonfire outright banishing characters, something that other colors out of Sapphire could hardly do. And they arguably had one of the most powerful cards in Lorcana today, which is the song Be Prepared, a threatening board wipe that could completely control the game and everyone feared.
And we also saw Shield of Virtue and LeFou Instigator, readying characters like Maui to challenge again, or even at this time readying the Queen Wicked and Vain to draw multiple cards. Aladdin Heroic Outlaw was another good option for these readying effects to gain you lore and make your opponent lose lore, which is lower cost Ruby Aladdin Street Rat also lowered opponents' lore. Then we had evasive options with Ruby, something that only Amethyst, Ruby, and Emerald shared together at the time, with a few Steel and Sapphire that only gained evasive on their owner's turns. These evasive cards being played for Ruby were Goofy Daredevil, Pongo Old Rascal, and the legend himself, Mickey Mouse Brave Tailor.
This is where you could see Ruby mix in with Emerald very well. Evasive was hard to compete with if you didn't have removal or evasive counters. So Emerald liked using Tinkerbell Most Helpful, Peter Pan Never Landing, and both Genie on the Job and Genie Powers Unleashed. However, it wasn't until Rise of the Floodborn that the evasive begun to really make waves in the meta. Emerald at the time was probably one of the weaker colors, even though it could pair up well with many colors. Emerald had high lore characters that opponents didn't want to challenge, or it would slow down their game plans, using cards like Cheshire Cat Not All There, Cruella de Vil Miserable as Usual, and Cusco Temperamental Emperor, one of the best cards for Emerald in the set, who was another favorite to use just in time on. And since opponents didn't want to challenge these characters, some decks would use cards like Iago, Loudmouth Parrot, John Silver Alien Pirate, and The Beast Is Mine to force opponents into a challenge. Emerald also bounced opponents' cards to their hand using Mother Knows Best, and 2 cards that we've mentioned before, Cruella de Vil and Genie.
And this gets us to probably what was the best color at the time, Amethyst. This color could be used with any color in the game. It had the most draw options, in Friends on the Other Side, Magic Mirror, the Queen Wicked and Vain, Maleficent Sorceress, and Ursula Power Hungry. It had early threats, gaining lore and Maleficent biding her time, and Pascal's Rapunzel's Companion, with Pascal being hard to remove in the early game at the time. They had characters that could challenge in Dr. Facilier, Charlatan, Rafiki Mysterious Sage, and even turn 4 with Zeus God of Lightning and Jafar Keeper of Secrets. Pocket Watch was a great item to give characters rush and immediately challenge opposing characters. Mickey Mouse Wayward Sorcerer and his little friend Magic Broom Bucket Brigade would be the beginning of the broom decks, something that has been built on each set. And finally, it controlled the board with characters like Elsa Snow Queen, Befuddle, and the infamous Elsa Spirit of Winter.
If you noticed, most of these cards we mentioned are still having a huge impact in the game today. This set is arguably the most powerful one so far, but what we consider to be a close second is the next set, Rise of the Floodborn. And with Rise of the Floodborn, we saw the introduction of a new keyword, Resist. And it was in this set that we began to fill in gaps of what was missing in each of the colors. One of the biggest gaps was something that we've mentioned before, card draw. Something that every color began to see a little bit more from this set going forward. Rapunzel, Gifted Artist, and Painting the Roses Red were added to Amber, and though Amethyst didn't really need any more card draw, it still got some in Blue Fairy, Rewarding Good Deeds, Cusco Wanted Llama, Merlin Rabbit, and sometimes even Yzma Scary Beyond All Reason. Emerald got some much needed help with Donald Duck Perfect Gentleman, Prince John Greediest of All, Hypnotize and Improvise. Ruby got Queen of Hearts Sensing Weakness, Dinner Bell, and Go the Distance. Sapphire definitely got the most in this set, with Popsicle and Hiram Flaversham Toymaker, as well as a few others like Gaston Intellectual Powerhouse, Judy Hopps Optimistic Officer, Nothing to Hide, and Maurice's Workshop. Steel got Beast Tragic Hero, Cinderella Knight in Training, Jafar Dreadnought, The Huntsman, and Let the Storm Rage On. This was a much needed addition for each color to help balance them out a little bit more.
Removal was another thing that was lacking in many colors, and this set helped with that as well. Amber added the Queen Commanding Presence to shift out early and take care of early threats. They also added Last Stand and World's Greatest Criminal Mind to remove threats with actions. Amethyst got early challenging options with Madam M Snake and Madam M Fox, with Merlin Crab boosting a character to challenge early or even late game to remove big threats. They also added Yzma Scary Beyond All Reason, a character that could remove a threat or help you draw cards when needed. Amethyst also added Pinocchio Talkative Puppet to exert a character so you could challenge it and remove it. Emerald received Cheshire Cat from the Shadows, Enchantress Unexpected Judge, and Ring the Bell. Ruby received Felicia Always Hungry, Lady Tremaine Imperious Queen, Mother Gothel Withered and Wicked, Scar Vicious Cheater, Teeth and Ambitions, and the Most Diabolical Plan. And Sapphire received Judy Hopps to remove items and the action launch. And Steel received Benja Guardian of the Dragon Gem to remove items, Cinderella Stout-Hearted to remove readied characters, Robin Hood Capable Fighter to remove tiny little threats like Lilo Making a Wish, Let the Storm Rage On, and Strength of a Raging Fire.
Ultimately, when it boiled down to it, the meta didn't change too much with the release of Rise of the Floodborn. The first chapter saw Steel Song, Ruby Sapphire, and Ruby Amethyst taking over the meta. Rise of the Floodborn did much of the same, but there were several cards in this set that saw play and still see a lot of play today. Amber got even more fuel for Steel Song, with Cinderella Ballroom Sensation, Sleepy's Flute, and adding another early game singer by shifting the Queen Commanding Presence onto the Queen Regal Monarch as early as turn 2 to sing A Whole New World and Grab Your Sword. It released a lot more options to get characters out quicker, with Doc, Leader of the Seven Dwarves, and Zero to Hero, which is just basically another version of Just in Time in a song. And it released a card that created a new deck, which is Mufasa Betrayed Leader, a character that cheats out big characters for free.
Amethyst got a lot stronger as well, especially with the early game, using Madam M Snake, Madam M Fox, and Merlin Crab. And it really powered up in the lore department with Madam M Dragon, being the first Amethyst character with 4 lore. Arthur Merlin's Apprentice and Merlin Shapeshifter was adding lore by bouncing your characters to your hand. The item Sorcerer's Spellbook was a great item that can gain lore and be very hard to remove if you're not playing against Steel. Pinocchio Star Attraction had the highest lore for a character of ink costs of 2 at the time. And the final card was arguably one of the best cards in the game, Merlin Goat, which was a huge game changer.
And Emerald began to see a discard theme coming into play here, something that has increased every set since then. This included Hypnotize, Daisy Duck Secret Agent, Prince John Greediest of All, Lucifer Cunning Cat, Flynn Rider His Own Biggest Fan, Belle Hidden Archer, and Bucky Squirrel Squeak Tutor, a character that was considered by many to be overpowered until they recently nerfed him. Rest in peace, good buddy. We also saw some crazy combo potential with Beast Relentless, who could really pop off if you just had an opponent that can't answer it. It's just so hard to pull off that it doesn't happen frequently and didn't make it into the competitive scene, sadly. Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo is another card that could really change the game by doubling the effect of something like Merlin Goat or even Tinkerbell Giant Fairy. Finally, we see even more evasive support with Emerald, something that Emerald and Ruby really increased in this set. Emerald evasive additions included Cheshire Cat from the Shadows, Flynn Rider His Own Biggest Fan, Dr. Facilier Fortune Teller, Radigan Criminal Mastermind, and Ray Easygoing Firefly.
And this gets us to Ruby, with their notable evasive additions being Minnie Mouse Stylish Surfer, Minnie Mouse Wide-Eyed Diver, and the action that gives a character evasive, You Can Fly. Another RWBY character not mentioned yet that is notable is Shere Khan, Menacing Predator, a character that gives lore to your challenging characters such as Maui, Hero to All, and Gaston, Arrogant Hunter.
And then we had Sapphire really expand on the item thing to make item decks actually playable. It added Hiram Flavershem as an amazing draw engine, along with Popsicle, a cheap item to draw you a card immediately. You also had Judy Hopps, who could do something similar, as well as Nick Wilde, and then there was Noi, who could gain you some extra lore early in the game while being protected with your items. Alice Growing Girl was a character that was added to Sapphire, in a similar way to Belle Strange But Special, a card that if you meet certain criteria, it gained you a bunch of lore. This is a card that we're still keeping an eye on today, which hasn't made much of an impact, but certainly could if the meta comes the right way. Cogsworth Grandfather Clock was introduced, who makes your characters harder to remove by giving resist to them, while also having Ward himself, making him a perfect way to sing your 5-cost songs. And Sapphire also received an evasive counter with Cruella de Vil Fashionable Cruiser to help remove annoying characters early on, such as Pascal and Minnie Mouse Stylish Surfer.
Then finally we get to Steel, gaining helpful removal options with Jafar Royal Vizier to remove evasive characters and Lawrence Jealous Manservant to help remove stronger will-powered characters. They also receive more protection with Mouse Armor and the Prince. And the last card for Steel to talk about is Tiana Celebrating Princess, a character that would help shut down the powerful Steel Song decks. While the meta colors basically stayed the same during this set, we still got a lot of additions to each color that made each color better. But the next set is what changed the meta up and introduced some more color combinations into the meta. Welcome to Into the Inklands.
Into the Inklands introduced the new card type locations. Each color got 3 locations apiece here. However, only around about half of them even saw play. The ones that did see some play were Pride Lands, the Queen's Castle, Fang, Agrabah, Jolly Roger, RLS Legacy, McDuck Manor, and the Bayou. And even some of these weren't in the top tier decks, and most are not being played at all today.
In breaking down the impactful cards of this set, you'll notice there's a lot less than the past 2 sets, a theme you'll see to continue. However, some of these cards are very impactful. As we said, the meta becomes more diverse due to this set. For Amber, we got some early game cards such as Baloo von Brunswald XIII and Piglet Pooh Pirate Captain to help you gain lore early. Baloo also doubled as Protector, right beside Pluto Determined Defender and Kida Protector of Atlantis. And speaking of Pluto, we also got a lower cost Pluto for Ramp and Pluto Friendly Pooch. We also got 2 characters that like to have characters in your discard, one being Chernabog Evildoer, whose cost would be significantly reduced, becoming a beast of a card early in the game, and Perdita Devoted Mother, who could return lower cost characters from your discard to play. Finally, we see another discard theme from Amber with the Bare Necessities.
Moving on to Amethyst, it finally got some early game help with Rafiki Mystical Fighter and Chernabog's followers Creatures of Evil. We got the 3-cost Jafar Lamp Thief that helped to manipulate the top of your deck, and the 7-cost Jafar Striking Illusionist that could end games as soon as he was played. We saw a lot of people trying to make a deck completely based around Jafar to combo him with a whole new world and win the game right off. However, it just didn't prove to be consistent enough. We were introduced to moving damage around with Maleficent Mistress of All Evil and Bestow a Gift. We also got some interesting draw options with Genie Supportive Friend and the item The Lamp.
Emerald is what we saw have the biggest leap in the meta, mostly due to the Ursula duos, Ursula Deceiver and Ursula Deceiver of All. And add Kit Cloudkicker, who helped remove early game threats, and Curse Merfolk, who gained lore early in the game, and added to the discard theme. Morph was introduced and became all Floodborn's friend, as Strike a Good Match was finally a draw action that Emerald could be proud of.
Then we'll get into Ruby, gaining even more removal options here, with things like Stitch Little Rocket challenging in the early game, and then you have the item Maui's Fishhook, which could be used to give characters a little extra boost, especially when played with Maui for free. Prince Eric, gaining lots of lore, and if he was removed, could banish a threat. And then of course you have the very threatening Madame Medusa, becoming the new Lady Tremaine for the set. And then there was the Hydra, who, when dealt damage, could give that damage right back to your opponents. We received some more early aggro options for Ruby in Simba Scrappy Cub, a 2-cost character with 3 lore just like Pinocchio Star Attraction. And finally, we have Jim Hawkins, someone who could play many of these new locations for free and be moved to them for free.
Sapphire released more ramp cards with both Grandma Tala, Keeper of Ancient Stories, and Grandma Tala, Spirit of the Ocean, with the song How Far I'll Go as well. It also included arguably one of the best items for Tamatoa, being Lucky Dime, and still saw the release of damaging cards such as Baboom and Then Along Came Zeus. And it also came out with a counter to discard, being the Sheriff of Nottingham. They released great challengers in Mr. Smee, Bumbling Mate, and Robin Hood, Champion of Sherwood, arguably the best steel card this set. We got Rise of the Titans, which banishes an item or location, and a Bodyguard Kita to go along with the Bodyguard theme. And finally, we got the Location King, being John Silver, Greedy Treasure Seeker, that can surprisingly gain tons of lore.
So with Into the Inklands, it was clear that Emerald had a huge rise in the metagame, and our next set, Ursula's Return, continued that theme. Ursula's Return is the 4th and final set of this year. We covered this set over the past few months, so this will be a short recap of the cards that are currently impacting the game. Out of all the sets, this one has had the least amount of impact. However, their potential and power make these few cards some of the best in the game right now. This set did introduce the new mechanic, Sing Together, but for the most part, these cards haven't impacted the meta too much.
And looking at each of the ink colors, we start off with Amber, and we are seeing Daisy Duck Musketeer Spy and Ursula Eric's Bride increase the power of Amber Emerald discard. Donald Duck Musketeer Soldier is quickly becoming one of the better bodyguard options that's gaining one of your lower level characters and 1 extra lore. And Miracle Candle is showing up in a few decks as well, gaining you 2 lore that can really finish out a game for these aggro decks.
Amethyst didn't gain too much this set. However, it added to the Broom decks with Yin Sid and Magic Broom Illuminary Keeper. It also added Peter Pan Shadowfinder to be a sneaky card and Ursula Sea Witch Queen to put a stop to your opponent singing songs for free.
Emerald got the most power once again, starting with the pesky evasive characters such as Pegasus Gift for Hercules, Pegasus Cloud Racer, and possibly one of the best cards currently in the game, being Diablo Devoted Herald. We also got more discard support with the Muses, Proclaimers of Heroes, and We Don't Talk About Bruno. Emerald also gave us one of the few decent Sing Together songs, being Under the Sea, a board wipe whose power can be increased with cards such as Lost in the Woods. We also see stat increasing capabilities with Creaky and Hidden Cove.
And another color that increased in power, maybe as much as Emerald even, would be Ruby, with some lore gaining abilities in characters like Goofy Super Goof and Flynn Rider Frenemy, whose best friend is Sisu, Emboldened Warrior. It also received some more removal cards, such as Be King Undisputed, Brawl, Sisu Empowered Sibling, and Mulan Elite Archer. With Shimmering Skies around the corner, the newest Gaston Pure Paragon may make decks such as Mulan Injured Soldier and Beast Wounded actually playable now.
Then we get the Sapphire, which gave us 5 cards. These are Aerial Treasure Collector, the Queen Diviner, Scuttle Expert on Humans, Ice Block, and the Great Stone Dragon. And finally, we get to Steel, with Aladdin Brave Rescuer destroying items and shifting out early, Avalanche and Aerial Sonic Warrior dealing damage, Fortisphere making a case for Steel Sapphire in the item department, Phil No Nonsense Instructor adding lore with your heroes, and more broom options including Mickey Mouse Playful Sorcerer and Magic Broom Aerial Cleaner.
With that, it brings us to the end of the year. 4 amazing sets, and we're ready for the next year with something even greater. However, to finish this episode off, we want to quickly give a list of the top 20 cards in our opinion from the first 4 sets. And we do have an honorable mention here, and that would be Bucky Squirrel Squeak Tutor. He would have easily made the top 3 in this list, but since his Erida, he doesn't even make it close. So now, let's start off the top 20 Lorcana cards of the first year in our opinion.
Starting with Lucky Dime at number 20, an item that can be the most powerful item if you ramp quickly enough and play your cards right. And then at number 19, we have Lucky Dime's best friend, Tamatoa, So Shiny. A card whose powers surge after release of Popsicle, Hiram Flaversham, and Lucky Dime.
Coming in at number 18, we have Sisu Empowered Sibling, a character that can devastate opponents' boards, with 60 to 70% of the current meta decks being banished to Sisu's effect. At number 17, we have Beast Tragic Hero, a character that for Steel can be one of its best draw options, a character who can play two parts, either drawing you cards or challenging opponents by having up to 7 power once damaged.
Moving to number 16, we have Popsicle, an item that really gets the item decks rolling and drawing extra cards. Then at number 15, we have Tinkerbell Giant Fairy. This character can deal lots of damage, and if she challenges, deal even more damage to become sometimes a one-sided board wipe.
Number 14 is Ursula Deceiver of All, one of the first characters to really bring Emerald into the metagame. At number 13, we have Robin Hood Champion of Sherwood. This Sly Fox can gain lore, destroy characters, and draw cards. The versatility is just too good.
And with number 12, we have Brawl. Even with Shimmering Skies releasing, the amount of characters used in the meta with 2 strength or less is crazy, so be expecting this as a staple in almost every Ruby deck. At number 11, we have Madame Medusa. Madame Medusa has become a staple in Ruby, being either beside Lady Tremaine or replacing her altogether.
And now we get into the top 10. Starting it off, we have Grab Your Sword at number 10. One of the best action songs in the game, sometimes being a one-sided board wipe that your opponents just can't come back from. And at number 9, we have Ariel Spectacular Singer. She's what makes Steel Song decks actually run, and she doesn't seem to be going anywhere, even with new cards coming out like Prince Naveen.
Moving to number 8, we have Madame M. Fox. She is a character that can protect your lower or damaged characters, sending them to your hand. And she also comes out early on the battlefield, surprising your opponents by banishing their exerted characters turn 3. Coming at number 7, we have Fishbone Quill. This card can get out of hand quickly, ramping your ink to levels that you probably don't even need.
At number 6, we have Hiram Flaversham, a character that keeps item decks with a full hand, something that Fishbone Quill really needed, and he can draw at times up to 6 cards or more before he finally goes away. And now we begin the top 5. Starting at number 5, we have Maui Hero to All. Coming out in the first chapter, but he hasn't gone away since then. Being able to be played and immediately remove most threats on the board with his high willpower, he can even take out multiple characters before he is banished.
At number 4, we have Diablo Devoted Herald. It's one of the best cards early in the game that can get out of hand quickly if your opponent does not deal with it. Then to number 3, we have Merlin Goat, and he is the greatest character on our list right now, being able to gain lore very easily and even win the game with ease.
Coming in at number 2 is the song Be Prepared, wiping the board clean, and if you get the chance to sing this song, your ink is open to fill the board while your opponent suffers. Finally, we get to the number 1, which is A Whole New World. Steel Song, Jafar Striking Illusionist, Prince John, and Sheriff of Nottingham are all in love with this card.
And with that finishes the first year of Lorcana. What are your favorite cards and combos from the first 4 sets of Lorcana? Leave a comment below to let us know.
Be sure to follow us on social media to keep up to date on the latest Tactical Ink news. Also, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you can tune in every week for a new episode of Tactical Ink.
See you next week.